So the next thing we did is we did 5, 4. So 5, 4 is where we took the concept of plugging in and making a table, and we applied it to polynomials. Okay, so with this one, the tricky part with this is just finding x's, okay, but a lot of you know how to do that. So you're going to find x's. X can be anything you want. I take it as a rule of thumb to make sure you pick a couple of negative x's, so -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and what they're asking us to do here is to estimate the x-coordinate which the relative max and minima occur. So in 5.4, what we did, I'm going to write it here, we did graph, so that's the first part. We located zeros, so that was the next part. And the last part is we found max or relative, max and mins. So that was what we did in 5.4. So we're going to do all of that with this one example. Okay, so when you pick an x value, what you're doing is you're taking that x and you're plugging it in. Okay, if you need more practice with that, go ahead and pause the video and practice on plugging the number in for x. So you would take -3 and plug it in for all of your x's. Then you would take -2 and plug it in. So the answers for that, when you do it, you should have gotten -49, -15, 1, 5, 3, 1, and 5. Okay, so we're going to plot these points, but before I plot them, I need to know kind of an idea of how my graph is going to look. So to figure that out, we look at the highest exponent. It is a 3, which means that my ends are going to be pointing in opposite directions. So one will be up or down and then up, but they're facing opposite directions. So to know which directions they're facing, I look here in front. In front there, it's a positive because there's no negative symbol, so it's implied positive. Okay, so it's positive, which means my second end is pointing up. So if they're opposite, it means my first one has to be pointing down. So I at least know that. Now I don't want to plot -3 and -45 because that's a huge number. I really also don't want to do -2 and -15 because that's a pretty big number. I'm going to start with -1 and 1. So x is -1, my y is 1, there's my first one. 0, 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my second one. Then it's saying 1, x is 1, and we have a 3. And then 2, and a 1, and 3, so 1, here's 3, and back up to a 5. Okay, so my graph looks something like this. So my end was a little off, but nonetheless, we know this side is going to be pointing up, and this side is pointing down. Okay, yes, rough sketch, but it gives us what we need. So first we're going to go ahead, so we got the graph down, so check. And even though the directions don't ask us for zeros, I want to go ahead and state the zeros so that you get an idea of what we did in 5.4. So the next part, we're going to state zeros. So zeros just mean that we are looking at where it crosses the x-axis. So we can see it's crossing the x-axis one time. So I'm just going to have 1, 0. So I'm going to look at my table. So it's going negative, negative. Oh, it's going positive now. So I have a 0 between x is equal to -2 and x is equal to -1. And we know we only have one of them because we can look at our graph and see that it's only touching the x-axis one time. So that was the 0 part of 5.4. Okay, so let me check that off. So we did that. Check. And we did the graph, so check there. The last part is telling us where is the max and where is the min. So to find that, we're going to look at our graph. Okay, well, I can see that it peaks right there, so that means that's going to be a max. Okay, and then it dips over here, so that means that's going to be a minimum. Okay, and to state these, we state what the x equals at that point. So x at this tall point here was x is 0. Okay, now let's look at our table to see if that makes sense with our table. So I'm going to go where x is 0, which is right here, and I'm going to look at the y value. The y value is 5. 5 is greater than 1. 5 is greater than 3. So 5 is the greatest number in that area. So that's why that's a max. Well, now let's look at our minimum. So our minimum was around here. I know this is a rough sketch, but let's look at the table. So that was where x is equal to, it looks like 1, 2. So x was equal to 2 there. So let's go where x is equal to 2. So here's where x is equal to 2. Now if I'm looking at it, I'm going to look at the y value. And my y is 1. Now, if it's a minimum, it should be the smallest number in that area. So if we look, 1 is smaller than 3. So yes, that's good. And 1 is smaller than 5. So it means we have a relative minimum at x equals 2. Right? And that was everything we did in 5.4. We talked about finding zeros, we talked about graphing, and finding the relative max and the relative min. Okay, the biggest part with this is just practicing plugging in the x values, okay, and then knowing your end behaviors. Have a wonderful day.